Hello, I'm Brian from the TubeClockDB, and today we're going to be looking at the LoRa Nixieclock from Nixiekits.eu, in addition to the really cool wireless GPS transmitter and receiver. Let's begin with our standard size comparison. Here's a can of Diet Coke. As you can see, this clock is actually pretty small. It's not much larger actually than a can of Coke. These are the GPS receivers and transmitters. They actually have the same enclosure. I don't know if you can tell, they're about the same diameter actually as a can of Coke. To be a little more precise, these are about 2 centimeters tall. And this is about 3.5. Let's do a walkthrough. This is LoRa. There's also the Lars design, which is electrically almost identical. The big difference between the two is the enclosure, and this uses IN2 tubes, whereas Lars uses the IN17s. One of the things you'll notice right off the bat is that this looks a lot like the IN12 design that Jordan came up with a couple years ago. It uses a similar extruded aluminum side pieces here, along with an acrylic front, back, top, and bottom. And I certainly like being able to see the inside. It's one of the selling features for me, being able to see the insides and how it works and to kind of admire the engineering behind it. Let's take a look here. So we have a little offset board here which connects to the tubes and the Lars. Obviously this is a different piece, but the main PCB here is identical between the two. And let's turn this around one more time. See if we can get a better view here of this. There's a PCB that's standing perpendicular here. Maybe we'll zoom in here in a minute and get a better look at that. But that's a wireless GPS receiver. So this does not have the GPS receiver in it. Instead, this is a radio to pick up on a GPS signal that's being broadcast by another device. And we'll take a look at that here in a minute. So on the front, we've got kind of a nice gold finish here, the IN2 tubes. On the back side, we have a couple more options than we're used to for some of the other Nixiekit designs. You can have there's a setting for the alarm for whether you're receiving data. In this case, it is the GPS receiver and whether it's in sync and daylight savings. We have a couple buttons here. The menu itself is actually pretty easy as usual. And a little USB power supply here. And so this can be powered via just a standard USB port. You don't need a high current thing like, say, an iPad charger or anything like that. And then lastly, one of the little touches that I really like is that all the menu options are at the bottom. So if you have a couple clocks in your collection and you can't seem to keep track of the manuals like I can, this provides a nice reference so you can see how to set the devices without having to hunt down all the paperwork that came with this device. Let's take a look at the transmitter and receiver here for a second. They're kind of cool. They look nearly identical, even to the markings on the top. The GPS transmitter, however, kind of backwards, has a little USB port on the back. Now this USB is just for power, and this is actually the full GPS receiver. It takes the time and rebroadcasts it using radio waves within a short radius. And the point of this is, what I end up doing is I plug this in my wall, just with a little USB power adapter, and set it by my window. On the other side of my room, I have the LoRa clock, and that actually has the built-in receiver. So these are the only two pieces that I need. This picks up the GPS time, and this receives it. And so now I can have a GPS synchronized clock without having to string wires across my room. Now let's say your clock doesn't have the built-in Nixiekits receiver. Let's say, for example, you have a clock from Nixiekits or something like that. What this does is you can plug this in, this receiver, to the back of that clock. And so again, you can use this device to broadcast the GPS time and this one receive it, which allows you a little more freedom so you don't have to, again, string cables across your room. It's certainly one of the nice little features that I like. Additionally, this transmitter can power dozens of these little receivers, so you can actually have multiple clocks all synchronized off of the same transmitter. You don't need one transmitter per receiver. Pairing them is pretty straightforward. You plug in the receiver, you plug in the transmitter, then you plug in the receiver, and you're good to go. Now, I've been waiting a while and tried a couple times to get a GPS sync. I'm having a little difficulty. That really has nothing to do with this clock. In fact, every one of my GPS clocks suffers from that problem. It's a little counterintuitive considering the fact that I live in the middle of nowhere on top of a hill, but that's just kind of the nature of where I live, I guess. We know that we don't have a GPS sync because this is still flashing. And this red here lets us know that the RF link is now active. So we're just going to plug in the clock, nothing special here, just UPS power, and this is just the antenna. And let's see what happens. If I can plug that in. There we go. Power's up. There's a little diagnostic LED here. We can see it flickers at the same rate as this red one does down here. The interesting buttons, or excuse me, lights are actually on the back. And we have data and sync. And so this, I don't know if we can get these two to show up on video. It might be difficult. are flickering at the same rate, which lets us know that they're communicating. We know that because we've got both the data and the sync light lit up, or illuminated, excuse me, that it is working. We just simply need this guy to pick up on a GPS signal. And this isn't something you would turn on and off on a regular basis. You would really plug it in and leave it. You can turn this on and off and all you want, and it won't have to re-find the GPS signal. And so how I usually have this set up again is I have this sitting in my windowsill, and this sitting on my desk or in my bedroom or something like that, and it will again pick up the GPS time without me having to worry about certainly moving all the wires associated with it. And the other nice thing too is since it does take a long time for me to sync, again on all my clocks, not just this one, I don't have to do this procedure regularly. Unfortunately for filming the review, I do have to unplug it to show how it works. So let's take a look at the other receiver here. Again, here's a transmitter. I haven't done anything with it since the last shot. Here's the GPS receiver. We just have a mini plug connection back here, and it plugs right back into my, my Nixiekits clock. I'm just going to plug in the power. There we go. I don't know if you can see this. The radio lights are flickering at the same rate, so we know they're communicating. So this guy's broadcasting the time, this guy's receiving it, and this clock is using the signal as if it were just a native GPS receiver. And the cool thing is, because this is broadcasting it, we can have both of these clocks synchronized off the GPS. So the lower clock here is using its little built-in receiver. This clock is using the external receiver, and this is providing the time base for both of the devices. Now I want to take a minute just to stress something. This clock itself is currently being set via GPS, but you don't have to. It can also use DCF, WWVB, or MSF. Alternatively, if you don't want to use one of the external time sources, you can certainly set the clock yourself, and it has its own internal reference. It'll operate just like any other Nixiekits clock. Again, this is the LoRa design that uses IN2 tubes. Lars uses IN17s, they're a little bit different. I wanted to point out that this uses an upside down, there we go, number 2 for a 5. It's just one of the quirks of these older Russian tubes. Really doesn't hurt the legibility, it just looks a little odd. It does have a slightly denser mesh than, say, the IN17s or a couple other Nixie tubes. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to come out on video, but certainly in real life it's easy to read. In fact, it's easier to read in the daylight than a lot of my LED clocks, but it's just one of the quirks of the tubes that I wanted to point out. Let's take a closer look at the menu. The menu system is bifurcated. So the first menu adjusts things like timekeeping options and display. And the second option, or excuse me, the second menu really only covers the LED backlighting. So we're going to take a look at the first menu. It has most of the features you'd expect. It has 12 or 24-hour mode. You can adjust the date format to match your region. You can blank the leading 0. But one of the features that I think is really neat and I haven't seen much of before is it's got a nighttime mode, which shuts the tubes off at night. It has also what's known as a master blank mode, which actually shuts off the HV power supply. So it saves electricity and prolongs the life of the device. And you can also set these based off of weekdays, weekends, or all days. And so if you have this clock only at home or only at work or something like that, you can have the clock shut off for the entire weekend. So there's no point in having it run if you're not going to be around the office. And having that little option I thought was kind of unique, and actually it had never crossed my mind before, but it's a clever little feature that I appreciate. To get into the menu itself, we're just going to press and hold the set button. So let's turn this back around. Is that in focus? Pretty much. We're going to hold it down. Now when this displays 99, we know that we're in the menu. We have menu item 1. Let's try this. Menu item 1, and its value is 1. And so there's a nice table in the manual which shows what all of these do. And we want to go to menu option, let me just double check this, number 22. So we're going to press the set button a few times, and what menu item number 22 does is it changes the slot machine effect. 22 is set to 0, which is disabled. And I want to display it every minute because it's kind of a neat effect. There we go. Just press the button below it to set it. 1 is every minute, every 10 minutes, every hour, and on midnight. Slot machine effect is just an anti-cathode poisoning effect. Let's go to number 26 because those are the display modes. 0 is standard, 1 is fading digits, and 2 is fading with a scroll back effect. So that's where we saw it display the date back and forth. Let's get out of this menu here. Perfect. And that's the slot machine effect. It's pretty cool. Now to get into the LED menu, we're going to press and hold the DST button. We'll do that in a second. As a side note, the DST allows you to quickly turn on or off daylight savings time. Now this feature only works in radio broadcast time. It will not work on GPS because GPS doesn't actually have the daylight savings time information encoded in it. So let's jump into the LED menu. We're just going to press and hold this button. What we have is we've got the hour and then the R, G, and B value for it. And so what we're saying is at 20 hours, it should display this color. Now, some of these have special values. You can manually specify a color, or in this case, 9 means auto cycle between the colors. And this here adjusts the speed then. So you can, if this isn't set to 9, you can manually specify a red, green, and blue value. Or if it is, you can have it just nicely cycle between the colors. And so we're just going to exit this menu. And we can see it now slowly fading between, actually quickly fading, between the different color options. So I've been watching the Nixiekits.eu clocks evolve over time, and you can certainly see the result of that. So the LoRa on its own is a very solid design, but we have things like tube saver mode for the weekend, something which isn't immediately obvious, but once you see it, you can definitely see the use case for it. And so, standalone, it's a solid design, and I wouldn't have any problems recommending it. Now, when it's paired with the wireless GPS receiver and transmitter, it becomes an even more compelling design. I like being able to have a GPS sync clock, especially when you have a bunch to set. It makes life easier. But having it, greater than 6 feet from my window is something that I really appreciate. And so, I don't have any problems recommending this clock. It's a very nice, solid design. It's not really meant to compete with Ion 18 clocks or something like that, but it's a cool little desk clock. If you want something for your office, I'd certainly recommend it. I know some people don't care for the LEDs behind it. I happen to like them. I like the color effects. I like watching them fade. But if you don't, you can certainly shut them off too. So I know some people don't care for that, but it's really kind of a moot point in my opinion. So go check it out, Nixiekits.eu. It's a solid design. This is the LoRa clock. Lars is the other version. And this is a wireless transmitter. And the wireless receiver is right here.